So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio.
Think cohabitation is okay, but the truth is there's another story that specifically most millennials just haven't ever heard. We'll touch on that in just a second. My guest a little later on today will be ODay, who is the executive director of Integrity Restored, who is helping bring people out of the addiction and horror that pornography is. We'll be talking together about some of the trends we're seeing in pornography, the increase in use, in fact, the increase in use even among young people, very young people, with this quarantine, and what are some of the great solutions that Integrity Restored and others have to offer to really bring people out of this sexual misery and this addiction that is ruining love and just making people unhappy. So we'll be talking about that in just a little bit with ODay. But back to this topic of cohabitation. Most millennials haven't heard another story. And I think that this is part of the reason why it's such a norm for them. I was looking at a stat the other day, and it was showing that among 18 to 44-year-olds, more people cohabitate than have ever actually even been married. Should say something for what's going on with regard to marriage. But I want to tell you a story. So I went last year to this wedding not too long after my husband and I had gotten married, and I was traveling, speaking all over at that point in time. And so I ended up at the wedding alone because I happened to be in the same state. And as I'm there at the wedding, I end up visiting with, people I never would have engaged with at a wedding, because normally, I'd be there with friends, but I didn't really know anyone other than the bride. And so lo and behold, here I am at the table of all the groom's most intimate family somehow. And I'm getting to know, the great uncle, swing dancing with the uncle. It was a blast. I just had a great time during the wedding. And next thing I know, I end up next to another one of the family members, close to my same age, clearly a millennial. And we kind of ended up in that conversation of, oh, what do you do? What do you do? And, I said, oh, I work in Catholic radio. We deal a lot with kind of some of those hot button issues. And he said, oh, interesting. And from that point on, he's kind of giving me this attitude of okay, you're cute. That's cute that's what you do. And kind of giggling at me almost oh, you're that good Catholic girl. And so, I just laugh it off and keep enjoying the time. And we end up having conversations. And somehow it comes up that he hadn't invited his girlfriend to the wedding. And so I start to ask a little bit about his girlfriend, how long they had been dating. And I said, well, why didn't you invite her? You guys have been together for a while. You clearly love her. You say you love her. And he goes, well, to be honest, the next person, or should I say the girlfriend that I would bring to a wedding to meet the family would be the one that I was going to marry. And I'm not sure about that. And then about 30 seconds later in the conversation, get this. He says that he's getting ready to make the next step with this girlfriend. I said, oh, what's that? Well, of course. What do you think it is? The next step is, we're going to move in together. That's what I'm thinking. And so here I am, talking to this guy, and he can tell I'm kind of just looking at him, smirking a little bit. And I said, well, why? And he's, talking about, it's just, the next step. I feel like I really love her and I care about her. And, I feel like I need to do something. And I'm interesting. So now I'm sitting here thinking, I clearly don't think this guy really has much of any religious background. So my first step is, okay, what is this man's philosophical mindset? Where is he coming from that I can talk to him on his language and on his level? And so the conversation continues. I don't even touch the topic of cohabitation. Next thing I know, I find out that this guy loves and is a follower of Jordan Peterson and Jocko Willink, two men in the last 10 years, or should I say even 5 years, who have been calling men out to step up, get after it, make commitments, put their shoulders back, stand tall, and be a man. And so I looked at him and I started laughing. I said, I find it fascinating that you love Jocko Willink and Jordan Peterson, because here you are getting ready to move in with your girlfriend who you clearly love, but you're about to make this decision that is literally going to put your entire relationship at risk. And he laughs at me. He's like, okay, come on, like Miss Chastity speaker, Catholic radio. And I'm like, I haven't said anything about my faith in this conversation, but if you want to go there and mock me, that's totally fine. And so then all of a sudden he goes, okay, I'm sorry. You're right. I went too far. So the conversation continues, and basically he heard the other side of the story that we never hear. And the fact is this, is that cohabitating, shacking up, as my friends hate it when I call it. They're like, can we just use better words? I'm like, no, it's shacking up. You don't like the words? That's fine. And I think a lot of people think shacking up with poverty. Well, actually, statistics show that people who shack up tend to have a lower level of education, tend to have a lower means of income. It's just some of the truth of it. But that's beside the point. What this man clearly wasn't learning is that compromised love is what comes from shacking up, cohabitating. And so we talked on a very simple level. I spoke his language. Like, here, you love Jocko Willink, who says, get after it. You love Jordan Peterson, who encourages you to make commitments. Yet by lacking commitment and not wanting to get after it, you're saying, here, I'll move in with my girlfriend, this woman I clearly love. But don't you realize that people who move in together have a very high level of insecurity and a very high level of dishonesty in their relationship, because the woman's always scared that he's going to leave. And so she makes compromises that she wouldn't normally make if she had known that he was committed to her. Not only that, that leads to dishonesty on both sides, because then we're not truly ourselves, because there's always this attitude in fighting that I can't really say what I have to say, or I can't really be myself because I don't have that commitment from the other person. These are things that we should be learning and figuring out about each other before moving in together, before having children, or might I say, before getting married, which provides the safe environment for that relationship to blossom. Not only that, I asked him, are you actually interested in marrying this girl? Because he's listening to me and he goes, I never thought, that kind of does breed insecurity. And I could see how there would be some dishonesty here. I said, okay, so now tell me, do you want to marry this girl? Because you clearly love her. And he said, I do. I said, well, when? He goes, well, I don't know. I just thought, this was the next step. I said, well, you're totally decreasing the likelihood that you will ever marry this person. And it's not just a trial run. The truth of the matter is that when you choose to live together before marriage, you are decreasing your likelihood to ever marry, and you're increasing your likelihood to divorce. And okay, sure, he's going to say, well, I know this person who got married after living together. So that's totally true. Some people have. But they are the exceptions, and if they stay together after having lived together, they too are the exceptions, not the norms. And so what came out of this conversation was a guy who said, I love and care for my girlfriend, but no one had ever told me that I'm putting our whole future at risk by thinking that moving in together is the next step. I didn't talk about sex. I didn't talk about religion. And this guy was totally on board. And you know what he did? 5 minutes later, he ran outside because he realized he made one of the greatest mistakes, that he didn't invite his girlfriend, who he loves dearly, to a wedding to meet his family. And he sat outside for the next half an hour talking to his girlfriend on the phone. And I have to tell you, I think this guy's kind of lucky, because, ladies, if he's not willing to introduce you after years to his family, yet he's willing to move in with you, you gotta ditch him. What are we putting up with? I mean, come on. So I don't know where this relationship ended up going, but there was my, brief couple hours of marriage advice. It was so funny because I decided, I'm going to leave the wedding a little early. I had to, take a few hour drive back to the airport that night. And as I'm leaving, he's going, wait, what are you doing? I wanted to talk to you more. And I thought, you know what? I kind of felt this pull. Should I stay? Should I talk a little longer? Because maybe this was a good opportunity. But I thought, you know what? Our Lord, plant the seeds. He needs to search out truth. And you and I are responsible for speaking to people where they're at. we need to stop. I want to use a word that I shouldn't use on air, but kind of footing around the topic. We need to stop doing that. We need to be bold and have conversations, but again, recognize what are people's life philosophy that we can speak into in the situations that we find ourselves in. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie. Thanks for joining me. I'm really excited to bring to you my next guest, Jim ODay from Integrity Restored. You can find him at integrityrestored.com. He's the executive director there, and he has quite an impressive background. I find it fascinating that he comes from a background of working in defense, homeland security, and now he's working to help battle one of the greatest epidemics in our nation today, and that is pornography. Jim, thanks for being with me.
Timmerie, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
I was looking at an article that came out this week talking about how there's been a surge of online users overall with regard to pornography. But one of the stories I hadn't heard yet was that Snapchat, did you hear this? Snapchat and Teen Vogue have actually been working to promote sexting among teenagers. And so basically they're encouraging teenagers to create and distribute child pornography. And this has been a really big thing during this quarantine. What are your thoughts on this, and what have you kind of seen as the trend with this?
Well, it doesn't surprise me at all. Snapchat, I tell parents, and unless your child is in the CIA, there's no reason they need an app where the message is going to disintegrate after 30 seconds. They're not going to use it for anything good. And these companies are driven by volume and numbers, and they know that, especially among young people, but even among old people, sex sells. So they're going to keep promoting that stuff. And the problem is, I go out and talk to kids all the time at high schools and colleges all across the country, and they think it's safe because that picture goes away. Well, that picture goes away on their phone that they just looked at it, unless somebody did a screenshot. But it's always on Snapchat servers. And those things get hacked all the time. And now you fast forward 10 years, you're married, and your husband finds a picture of you when you're in high school.
Yes, that is
How do you have that conversation? I mean, the numbers of the explosion, Timmerie, in pornography usage since this pandemic started are incredible. Some estimates up 25%. So that could be roughly 10 million unique viewers new to those pornography sites.
Wow. And I'm looking at some of the language, Jim, that Snapchat is using with Teen Vogue on Snapchat. I mean, they're saying, and this is to teenagers. I mean, we're talking about tweens, right? So middle school kids, teenagers. They're saying stuff like how to sex, the best tips and tricks. They are saying should it make you feel good, and they talk about, new ways and new things to do with your boo as you're developing a relationship. And they say, quote, forge an emotional bond with this sexting. And I just can't believe it. I think that we're so ignorant when we think, well, this is just a form of communication for young people. Yet young people are looking for love. They're looking for connectedness, and they're learning the wrong ways to connect via these social media apps at times.
Absolutely, Timmerie. I do a talk for middle school and high school girls called Pretty as a Pixel. And we know that currently about a third of all teens admit that they've sent sexually suggestive texts or images online. A third.
Wow.
Doesn't matter, family demographics, Catholic school education, public school, none of that matters. This is a third of our kids who are doing this. And then the problem is there's ramifications for that. There's cyberbullying, which becomes a huge, huge thing for a lot of these girls because they share it with the boy that they think they're in love with and have this special relationship with. And then he shares it with all his friends because it's a big joke. And the other thing that's really interesting is that when you study young girls that age, they don't know how to say no to this kind of pressure.
It's so
and I
true.
think as parents, that is such an important thing that we need to teach our daughters to be able to say no, because they feel powerless in this sexual onslaught that's just bombarding them all the time.
Right.
And it really breaks my heart. I mean, I'm older. I have a 32-year-old daughter, and, you know, thank God she was on the tail end of that, but I also have a 20-year-old son who's in the midst of it right now. And the pressure that these kids are facing is completely different from anything we face.
Right. And I want to touch briefly on what you said about young women in particular. And we know this as women, and I think that a lot of dads know this, and if they don't, here's the big, let on. A lot of women, a lot of teen girls, doesn't matter what age, often do things or don't do things because they feel bad. They feel bad turning a guy down, so they lead them on. They feel bad saying no, so they allow their bodies to be exploited. They feel bad in the workforce asking for a raise because they think someone else might be more deserving or someone else might need that money more. And so, like you said, there needs to be this new kind of empowerment for girls to know it's okay to say no, and it's important to say yes in the right context, and you should be empowered and emboldened to do that, but you need to know when and how to speak up for yourself.
And I mean, this is one of my, I consider it an age-old question. Where are the feminists in this issue? Because this is absolutely a feminism issue. We have to teach our young girls to be able to say no to this kind of pressure, to be able to say no to boys who are going to ask them to do these things. It's the new normal. It's dating 101 now, right? It's not pick up the phone and call up your girlfriend. It's send her a Snapchat and say, hey, send me some nudes. Yep. If you like me, that's what you're going to do.
Right.
Wow, we got to teach these girls that, no, that's not the answer.
What are just a couple of tips you have for dads? I know one of them you mentioned a second ago was helping them to know, they can say no. But what other tips for dads who are maybe uncomfortable approaching this topic, yet if you don't as a father, every other boy will for you before you even think about it?
God bless you for saying that. God bless you for saying that, because that is truth with a big T. You, Dad, cannot bring your own broken sexual narrative to this conversation. Your child doesn't have one yet. So your approach to this is critically important. And if you're not talking to your daughter about it as a positive male role model, those boys in school will be. Number one, we have to recognize that the average age of exposure to pornography in the U.S. is 8, 10, or 11, depending on the study you cite.
Right.
Any way you slice it, it's way too young. But our kids are being pornified, so we have to talk to them about that. And then we have to talk to them about the fact that boys are going to ask them to do these things. And if you have sons, by the way, same thing. Girls are going to ask them to do these things. And we have to give them the out. Hey, my mom and dad look at my phone all the time. They put some kind of software on there. They can see whatever I do. So, no, I'm sorry. I can't do that. That gives the kid the out. It makes mom and dad the bad guy. I don't care. That's fine.
And you're making me think, too, by the way, if you're just joining us, this is Jim ODay from Integrity Restored here with us today, the executive director. And I keep thinking about boys as well. And, I've worked a ton with teenagers as well. And, I'm always surprised that I'm at maybe a camp speaking or, overnight conference, and youth ministers are asking questions because they're having difficulty with the boys, or even college campuses, with the boys masturbating, essentially, and how they need this topic to be addressed. And it's always fascinating to me because when it's addressed, especially in a small group setting, I find that a lot of young boys have never been told that you're just not supposed to do it. They go, really? Like, they had no idea. And so same thing, I feel like there's this kind of lack of common, like, understanding, common sense, as many people say anymore, but also manners, and helping boys understand there's a right and a wrong way to interact with your body, and it's actually a lot more simple than you think. And there's a right and wrong way to approach a girl, and it makes sense, actually.
So, personal story, a little embarrassing, but look, I go around and talk about pornography now for a living. So I went to an all-boys Catholic high school. I had a spiritual director. We each did. We had to meet with him once a month. And he would say in spiritual direction, he was a priest, and he would say, masturbation's fine. So now fast forward, I'm married. I have children. I come back to the church. I'm in spiritual direction, and my spiritual director, prompted by the Holy Spirit, says, Jim, have you ever struggled with masturbation? I said, what do you mean, struggled? That's not a sin.
Wow.
He said, excuse me? We had to have a very long conversation because no one ever told me, Timmery.
Yeah.
No one ever told me, because the only input I had was from this priest who said it was fine. Don't even worry about it. Don't talk about it. And nobody else ever talked about it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So huge disservice. You know, in grammar school, the nun said, oh, if you play with it, you're going to get hair on your palms. Well, that's not helpful either, right?
I'm dying right now. I love our nuns sometimes.
Yeah, nobody had the truth. And if we look at something as simple, a phenomenal resource for parents to read and then work through with the teens, Theology of the Body for Teens.
Yes.
Tells you all about how normal it is to have these feelings, these temptations, these desires, but how you can look at them positively through God's lens.
Absolutely.
Which is a different approach.
Yeah, that's Jim ODay from Integrity Restored. And maybe you're listening and you're tempted to just kind of shut this conversation off because it's uncomfortable. We're talking about masturbation. We're talking about pornography. You don't really like going there with your kids. Why would you listen to it on a Catholic radio network? And I think sometimes our hearts begin to stir when we are convicted and uncomfortable because we know we are avoiding a topic that needs to be covered. And so I really hope if this isn't the right time to listen, that you head over to the archive at relevantradio.com/trending and listen to this later, or maybe share it as a resource with a friend, family member who needs help guiding their kids or maybe even themselves through understanding better this really difficult and delicate situation in our culture. So, Jim, tell us a couple more of some of the trends we're seeing right now during the coronavirus with regard to pornography.
Yeah, it's really frightening. We know the numbers are way up. And there's some really basic reasons for that. There's something I call the blasted effect. BLASTD. Bored, lonely, anxious, stressed, tired, and depressed. And those are all triggers for pornography use. Well, most of us are living those daily now, right? Secondly, there's been decades and decades of research that says strong emotions can often be misinterpreted in our bodies as sexual feelings. We've all been going through a ton of strong emotions. The ups and the downs during this coronavirus experience has created very strong emotions in us, and we can mistake that as sexual feelings. And so people can automatically gravitate towards pornography usage. Now, there's something even more scary. So we know that the pornography companies are targeting people during this pandemic. Starting early March, one of the largest providers of internet pornography made their premium content free. They didn't do that out of the goodness of their heart, even though that's how they masked it. Hey, we're going to help you get through this pandemic and this shelter in place and social isolation by giving you this great distraction.
Right.
No, they did it like a drug dealer, right? They're going to give you your first hit free because they know you're going to get stuck.
Right. They knew there was a need and they targeted it. It's a business. And this is what the pornography industry is. They are fueling and building an addiction. They want you to have an addiction. We'll be right back with Jim ODay from Integrity Restored to talk about the good stuff, the hope, the healing, and the resources to transform your life or give these resources to those you love.
We're talking about what you're thinking about. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
The Relevant Radio studio line is sponsored by Catholic Order of Foresters. Employment opportunities to become an agent or information about their flexible premium life insurance plans are available at relevantradio.com/Forester. My guest today is Jim ODay from Integrity Restored. He's the executive director. If you'd like to learn more, head over to integrityrestored.com. Jim, you were sharing with me that in light of this pandemic and this increase in pornography use and already the epidemic of pornography itself, that you have decided to launch a new coaching program with Integrity Restored. Can you share with us a little bit more about it and when it will be available?
Sure, yeah. This is something we are so excited about, Timmery. It's called the Integrity Circle Coaching Program. Level 1 is what we're releasing right now, and that's Foundations in Understanding. One of the things we've seen is that, most of our ministry was done more face-to-face prior to COVID-19. And we would go out all over the country. We had 5, 6 speakers working with us and travel. Well, obviously, we're not able to do that anymore. So we're going to use this online coaching program to reach people where they are. And right now, that's behind the computer screens. And so we identified 3 different audiences that this coaching program will help. That's those who are struggling, those who are affected by somebody struggling, and then those who care. So think clergy, ministers, people like yourself, who work with youth. And we're going to have a 26-week program, and if you do the whole program, you'll get a certificate of completion at the end. And the format's quite simple. You go online once a week, whenever's convenient for you, and you watch a 15-minute coaching session, and then you have 15 minutes of Q&A. In addition, you'll be granted free membership to the Integrity Circle online forum. And there you'll be able to talk to other people if you are struggling, if you're married to somebody who's struggling, or if you're in a position of care. And so we are really excited. This is going to launch the first week of June.
I love it. So if you want to learn more about this new coaching program from Integrity Restored, check it out the beginning of June at integrityrestored.com. And we'll be sure to mention it again here on Trending as things are released. Now, Jim, you've mentioned... And
Timmery, you have to know you have the scoop. You are the first person we've talked to publicly about this.
Oh, excellent. So it's new news. So be sure to keep an eye out because honestly, Jim, I think that this is a program that so many people need. They need the support group. It reminds me in a sense of AA. It reminds me of all of these other programs for people who are dealing with addiction, domestic abuse, and so forth, where they need a community, they need information, and this is what is being provided for them through this coaching program.
Yeah, we are so excited about it. And, one of the things is we want to make sure that we cover all angles of this. So we're going to define the science of the addiction.
Excellent.
But then we are Integrity Restored, and we're a Catholic organization. So we're going to incorporate into that the spirituality, the Catholic spirituality that can help the healing. We always say there's 3 pillars to healing. The first is strong counseling, scientific counseling. The second is an increase in the spiritual life and reception of the sacraments. And then the third is community, that group of supporters. And this coaching program is going to encapsulate all 3 of those things in a nice, manageable 30 minutes a week commitment that people can do and come away with a great, strong understanding of this problem.
This is incredible. And this is what we've been talking about on Trending. Just a couple weeks ago, we did a really neat episode telling the story of Terry Crews and his wife, Rebecca, and their marriage. And I heard from a lot of you after the show. And what I heard, Jim, was, people appreciated that it wasn't like, okay, just pray your rosary, just go to confession. No, Terry's story, Terry Crews, actor Terry Crews, comedian, his story is that he needed God. He needed counseling. He needed his wife to basically say, this is it, I'm kicking you out, in order to make the changes. And so I love that your approach is so well-rounded with Integrity Restore's new coaching program.
Thank you, Timmerie. And what Terry experienced is the only way for true and lasting healing. So many people who are struggling with this addiction white-knuckle it. And it looks like, for a certain period of time, that they're being successful. But the problem is, we are made body, mind, and spirit. And so unless you address all three functions the way God made us incredibly, and put sex in the right place, in the right order, with the right understanding, you're always going to struggle with this. And what Terry did is he got the science, he got the counseling he needed, he increased his spiritual life, and his wife was his community or accountability partner. She kept him accountable on his healing journey. It's just such a beautiful story.
Incredible story. If you didn't catch that episode of Trending, we told the full story with testimony from both Terry and Rebecca with clips. So be sure to check that out at relevantradio.com/trending, where you can listen to all episodes of Trending or connect on social media. Listen, I have a question for you, and I didn't tell you that we're going to cover this beforehand, but it's something that really bothers me within the Catholic community with regard to pornography. And it's something I hear often, and I do think that although we believe in the power of the sacraments, we also are doing our marriages a disservice if we have this attitude. And here's the thing, Jim. I'm hearing from people who will talk about having had years of a pornography addiction, not having fully healed it, or even maybe really gone that far in healing it at all. And then they make a commitment to get married. They get married and they say that the graces of the sacrament helped heal their pornography addiction. Now, I believe in the graces of the sacrament, but I'm sorry. I have a real problem when women, if they know, are committing to marrying a man who is addicted to porn, and with men who are proposing and marrying women who are still addicted to porn. I would love to get your thoughts on this.
You definitely didn't tell me we were going to have this conversation.
No, this is a big one, but I know I'm throwing it out there.
No, it's a great, look, you're making a perfect point. When we talk about marriage prep in the Catholic Church, in most cases, pornography gets maybe one or two questions, glossed over, they move on, right? Because as a church, we're still uncomfortable talking about this. It makes us nervous.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, if you are going into a marriage with long-term pornography usage, you are going into the marriage dysfunctionally. It can't be helped. You have to get the help you need prior to marriage in order for the marriage to be completely sacramental. I'm not a theologian. That's just my opinion. Mm-hmm. I think that so often we want to say, well, I love that person, so we have to get married. And we do believe, often incorrectly, that the power of the sacrament will heal us. But the fact of the matter is, God wants our participation in that healing. He does not just wave a magic wand and take it away, though he could if he wanted to. I just don't see him working that way very often. He wants our participation, and that participation then is going to mean before you get married, you have to do the hard work to get to the root of what caused your addiction.
Excellent.
Generally speaking, it's trauma.
Right. Yes. And you know what? I do have to say, as you're talking, it's making me think of a lot of points. One is that maybe part of the reason, because I hear this more so from a lot of young married couples right now. And so this story hasn't fully played out. So say you had a pornography addiction, you get married, you're doing great. You're not looking at porn. But every time my attitude is that poor wife, is she just your sexual outlet? And I know I'm going to be getting some emails and social media posts about this. But I really do have to ask that, because there's a strong likelihood that, and I'm not that I'm encouraging this, that if you have a pornography addiction going into marriage, that's grounds for an annulment. And not only that, but maybe your wife is your sexual outlet for a while, and the next thing you know, a little later down the road, that pornography addiction begins to act up again, and you begin to experience more. And the reality is, one thing is just,
heard that.
You've heard this story? Because the healing never occurred, just like you said. You've heard this. Okay.
Of times. Thousands of times. Look, it's when we first get married, we're on the honeymoon. We're on the high. But then life takes over, and the blasted effect again. Bored, lonely, anxious, stressed, tired, depressed. Those things happen to us, even when we're happily married. And so if your go-to self-soothing mechanism was pornography, why would that change once you're married if you haven't done the healing work?
Right.
You know what these young people have to realize, and my wife and I did, we did a little bit of work in marriage prep a number of years ago, and one of the greatest quotes I saw, and I wish I could tell you who the author was, but love is motivated, and I'm paraphrasing, but love is motivated by what it can give rather than what it can get. Mm-hmm. And so a pornified culture and a person who's struggling with pornography, that quote is reversed. It's, what can I get out of this? Because I need it. I need that dopamine rush. I need those endorphins. And so that's not love.
Right.
Love is, what do you give to the person? I give men's conferences all over the country, and you want to freak out a room of Catholic men, I tell them, hey, guys, we're going to talk about sex. So everybody sits up. Whoa, interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I said, the first thing you have to do is invite God into your bedroom. They're like, what do you mean? And I was guilty of this for a long time, right? I'd have a crucifix in every room in my house, Timmery. Every room. But not the bedroom. Because that was weird. That freaked me out. But if you gentlemen, you young guys who Timmery and I are talking to right now, you young guys who just got married, before you're intimate with your wife, you pray. You pray, Lord, help me touch her how she needs to be touched. Help me love her how she needs to be loved. I promise you, your sex life will be more amazing than anything you can imagine if you invite the Lord into that relationship.
That's Jim ODay from Integrity Restored, and this is the biblical story even. I always think about the readings of Tobit, right? The book of Tobit, and we read about this woman whose husband dies time and time and time again, and then Tobias goes and marries this woman, and he's the first one that doesn't die. And what was different? Before the night of their wedding, he sits down, kneels down, and they pray together, and they go to bed. And because he wants it to be clear that he's not taking his wife out of lust, he's taking his wife in love. And so they don't end up engaging in sexual intimacy that first night, but he's the only spouse that lives. And so there's a beauty to recognizing, no, this person is a gift that I am meant to treasure and protect. And I'm meant to live beyond this first night. And so I will make this sacrifice for my bride.
And what a beautiful, your descriptor was beautiful, because lust takes. It's all about taking. Love gives. So when you are making love with your wife, you're both giving to each other at the same time. And we have to remember, as Catholics, as human beings, God invented sex. He knows all about it. So invite him in. Let him be part of that. Bring the Holy Spirit truly into the most intimate part of your relationship. And your marriage will be beautiful, and your sex life will be incredible.
That's Jim ODay from Integrity Restored. Jim, thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited here at Trending about your new coaching program, because it's not just going to reach those people who have just now started experiencing pornography. It's the family members, the friends, the people who are ministering to them, but also, as you and I discussed, the people who have experienced porn addiction and haven't gone through a healing process to address what was going on. Even if it's not really a problem right now, this program will help that healing process. So we'll keep an eye out at integrityrestored.com, and we'll have to have you on again once the program launches. Thanks so much for being with us, Jim. We'll be right back here on Trending with Timmerie.
So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmerie on Relevant Radio and the Relevant Radio app.
With the churches closed, the May crowning is another important Catholic tradition that we can't participate in at our local parishes this year. So please be sure to join us as we honor Mary tomorrow at noon Central with Father Rocky at our annual May crowning Mass. You can also participate as we renew our consecration to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Listen or watch at relevantradio.com or on the Relevant Radio app. And it is the feast day tomorrow of Our Lady of Fatima. So this is a great time to make that devotion to Our Lady, honor her in your home. And honestly, I think it's one of the most beautiful ways to teach children about loving Our Lady, our Blessed Virgin Mother. You know, maybe having them pick some flowers from the yard if your flowers are blooming yet, or, you know, finding some way to give honor to Our Lady in our home in a simple way that your kids also can participate in. Speaking of children, I was really interested by a article I read the other day from the Wall Street Journal talking about how apparently Kim Kardashian had posted on Twitter a kind of how-to guide, just a couple tips of what to do with your kids during the quarantine. Now, I've never watched an episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians, but we've got to talk about them because a lot of people really do enjoy the show. And the reality is that between Kim Kardashian and her husband Kanye West, we have seen so many interesting, intriguing, and even good things come from that marriage this year that I think that they really are a couple to keep an eye on, because I see them going through this really incredible transformation. Even just some of the conversations the two have had, I've watched video clips of them talking about modesty and how Kanye's attitude's changing about modesty and how Kim is having to kind of come along for the ride and how she's having a tough time. And I'll never forget the comments as they're dialoguing back and forth. We did an episode here on Trending a few months ago as he's kind of saying, you know, look, it affects me when you dress the way you do. And she's saying, like, Kanye, you made me this way. You made me who I am. And so there's been this kind of dialogue and this conversation between the two of them, and even just how they're living their lives, that is fascinating to see. And I think a good conversation starter, because let's be honest, you may not watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians. I might not. But a lot of people really do like to keep up with them and their story. So here's the deal. This is basically the tweet that was deleted from social media. It was things to do while quarantined with kids. Kim ended up recommending things such as, and I thought that all of these were really sweet, practice hair and makeup with your kids, with your daughters. Hopefully daughters, come on people. I don't care if it's 2020. Another one was a bake with your children. She recommended looking at apps, so finding like new apps that your kids can use. Trying new fun things. Again, she doesn't set the bar that high. Just try something fun and new. Play board games and do some spring cleaning. And I thought that this was very practical, yet there was a major backlash of people kind of looking at the Kardashians being like, okay, here you are in your multi-million-dollar home with all your money, with your television show, et cetera, et cetera. And they started making snarky comments like paying your bills, like that's something to do with your kids. And so she ended up taking the tweet offline. And I think that's really sad because that's bullying people. I get that a lot of people are going through a difficult time, but there are also a lot of people who have eyes and ears on Kanye West and Kim Kardashian, and they're actually appreciating that this couple is starting to show some good elements of parenting, some good elements of talking out against pornography, talking about our Lord Jesus Christ. These have been some great things. And so I think that it's good to encourage good behavior sometimes. And even just looking at these tips, I actually think they're really sweet and endearing. I mean, honestly, think about young girls who would love to sit for hours and do their mom's hair and put their makeup on, even if that means big chunks of glitter in the middle of your forehead and lipstick across your cheeks. The kids are having fun. And they're doing something with you that's showing that you care to give your children attention. Another great ones I'm hearing so many people are enjoying doing is baking together. And I thought this one of looking up new apps is a great one. And I saw this in the Wall Street Journal article that actually the author of the article was saying, look, with working and being home more, we've had to loosen up that, okay, there are certain times where it's okay maybe to be on your technology for a little longer. So finding maybe new learning apps, good games for the kids to engage with is probably a good thing rather than your kids watching a Netflix show that they probably shouldn't be watching. And she even commented in the Wall Street Journal article about how Kim didn't even set the bar too high. She says, try new fun things. She doesn't encourage things that are out of touch for people. So the fact that people couldn't even relate to where she was, I think is somewhat telling about our culture. The last couple of years, there's been this theme that I've seen where we're having a difficult time relating to one another, and how even the simple tweet of Kim talking about things to do with your kids that, let's be real, all of us could probably be doing even if you don't have kids. It's simple. It's easy. It's saying think outside of the box. And I know something Kim herself has been talking about over the last couple months is that she's been trying to put her phone down, leave her technology away from her so that she could be a better mom and engage with them, because she recognized that it was distracting even for her. And so as I think about this, a kind of idea of not being relatable and people pressuring her to take her tweet down, on the other end of the spectrum, maybe one of the great things that has come out of this coronavirus, I'm going to call it house arrest because I'm just sick of it, is the fact that we are seeing that people are actually realizing they can relate to people better than they realized. That there actually are things that we have in common with each other. Even if the simplest thing is we're all stuck at home. Even if it's the fact that we're all fighting for toilet paper. Even if it's the fact that a lot of people do have kids and they're realizing I'm spending time with my kids that I never did before, and I'm having to learn how to entertain them, how to encourage them to go outside, how to get them to read books. And so when we see tweets like this from Kim Kardashian, she was trying to be relatable. And it made me ask the question of myself, when do I maybe struggle to notice that people are just trying to have a conversation that's relatable? Instead of maybe having an agenda about something that I want to talk about. Because right now, we are shooting over each other about politics. We shoot over each other, talking points and ideas and anger about various topics, that it's almost like we put ourselves in these vortexes and we don't hear anything that the other person says. But again, maybe the great benefit of this quarantine is we realize we have a lot more in common with other people. And there are a lot of things we can talk about, experiences that are really life-changing and transforming, and that are fun, simple, sad. We have more in common than we ever realized, and I think that is what people are learning right now.